Hello fellow Silver Saints, I hope you're all doing well. My name is Ashley and this is the Library of a Silver Saint where we talk all things books. How are you all doing? Oh my goodness. Okay, so in today's video, I wanted to do a very different kind of video. I've been planning this for a little while, or thinking about doing this for a little while, and haven't thought of the right time to do it and how to approach this. Ernie, do you mind? He's just attacking his ball toy in the background. Do you mind? You're being very disruptive. Chaos with Ashley and Ernie again, I guess, guys. The thing is, this is brilliant. This is necessary because it's almost like he knows the kind of video that I'm planning on filming today. The video that I've been planning on filming has been something that's been on my mind for a little while. And recently, I actually did a discussion on this with David from Four Corners of the Page, an amazing channel, and Johanna from Johanna Reads, another amazing channel. I'm such a massive fan of, I was fangirling. Both David and Johanna invited me to do a discussion on a topic that I want to explore a bit more today, which is, why do we like dark books? So I recently did a discussion over on David's channel with both he and Johanna about this, and we had a really interesting discussion about dark books and why we like to read them. We specifically explored some series that have dark themes, but this has been something that I've been thinking about for a little while, which is why they ended up inviting me to do the chat. So thank you both David and Johanna for inviting me. I was fangirling a little bit because I adore both of your channels. It was so lovely to be invited and so lovely to meet them, just wonderful people. And we had a really interesting discussion. And I think David said something along the lines of, how is it or why is it that as relatively well-adjusted people, we seem to really enjoy or seek out dark fiction or just dark media in general? And this is something that had been on my mind for a little while. Now, both David and Johanna are incredibly well read and had so many interesting series to sort of bring to the table and bring to the discussion, and so many interesting points. But this is something that I wanted to explore in terms of my own experience. And also I did have a little moment of, I shared a question on my Instagram, on my Bookstagram, asking people why they read dark books, to sort of get a bit of a voice of what other people's thoughts on this subject are. Now, I have gone and done some research for this. I have carried out some research. I just wanted to put in a disclaimer. I am going to be specifically talking about dark fantasy today. And I know that there are many different sort of subgenres of dark fantasy and just dark media in general. There are so many different subgenres, but I would be here all day if I was to explore all of them. I very specifically, in my research, used two phrases, which was, one was grimdark fantasy and the other was dark fantasy. I basically just carried out some research, just did a little bit of reading on why people choose to read this and why it's such a popular genre. But I did just want to put a disclaimer in. This is not a critique of the genre at all. I am an avid reader of I want to say lover, but I am a lover of sort of dark fantasy. And so it just really intrigues me. I won't be discussing whether it's sort of good or bad that we consume this media. I know there are a lot of arguments for and against that. This isn't a critique or a discussion on that at all. There's no right or wrong. It's more of a why. Why do we do it? Because I find that quite interesting. As a reader and consumer of dark sort of media, somebody who loves sort of dark movies, dark TV series, dark games, dark books, but also somebody who generally say that I'm relatively positive about life. I try to be as much as possible. Yet when I look at my physical TBR and things like that, I just notice more and more and more dark books. And it's something that I'm seeking out a lot more actively. I'm questioning myself, not as to whether I'm doing the right thing or the wrong thing, but I'm just wondering, why is it that I'm seeking out these kinds of books or seeking out this kind of media? I guess I'm just intrigued and I'm just curious, and I just wanted to start a little bit of discussion on it, just get a little bit of dialogue. And this is just in addition to the video that the discussion that I was part of with David and Johanna. So I will include the links to the research websites and things that I used for this in the description below, and I will be referencing other websites. So initially, I wanted to explore, what is dark fantasy? What is it? So I found an article on dabblewriter.com which explains, dark fantasy settings are horrifying by nature with dystopian landscapes, oppressive rulers, and dark magic. The horror genre presents a shocking departure from reality, while dark fantasy presents a hideous reality from which there is no escape. For the most part, the characters who populate dark fantasy stories are either rotten to the bone, miserable and oppressed, or in the case of the main characters, morally ambiguous anti-heroes. Now, I would say this is a very general sort of definition. I think it's impossible to give a specific definition. You know, it can be other things, but I think that's a good overview of generally what dark fantasy is as a genre. See, dark fantasies tend to take a more pessimistic view of things. They tell tales of power falling into the wrong hands and greed prevailing over generosity. It's a genre that suggests that the potential for evil is baked into all human souls, that we might all be villains under the right circumstances. This does seem like a good time to mention that dark fantasy stories rarely have a happy ending. I think that's a very good overview, and it's something that I've definitely noticed as a trend in the books that I have read. It definitely explores the human experience and the human condition and human nature in terms of choice, and actually what extreme lengths humans will go to depending on the scenario that they are placed into, which I find really, really interesting to sort of delve into. So in terms of dark fantasy, as I previously mentioned, there are so many different subgenres. You've got things like gothic fantasy, occult fantasy, dark fairy tales, and then also another popular title for a subgenre is grimdark fantasy. I'm going to add a definition of grimdark fantasy to this video, but generally I feel like it's very similar to dark fantasy, the definition for that, and so could apply quite widely. But just wanted to let you know that grimdark is specifically the definition that I'm giving here. So grimdark is a subgenre of speculative fiction with a tone, style, or setting that is particularly dystopian, amoral, and violent. The traditional tropes of traditional fantasy, honour, bravery, and nobility are essentially flipped on their heads, and they are completely rejected. Some examples of dark fantasy would be, or grimdark fantasy would be, Mark Lawrence's Prince of Thorns series, A Song of Ice and Fire by George R.R. Martin, Poppy War Trilogy by R.F. Kuang, Malazan Book of the Fallen by Stephen Erickson, The First Law Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, and The Prince of Nothing series by R. Scott Baker. I'm going to say R. Scott Baker, but I also want to say R. Scott Bakker. I'm not sure which it is, so apologies for that. In addition to this, Literary Hub says that grimdark is a feeling as much as a genre. Rather than embrace the idealised nobility of classic fantasy, grimdark instead seethes with brutality. In A Song of Ice and Fire, violence and amorality abound. The first book in the long-running series features, but is not limited to, an incestuous knight maiming a child for life, repeated sexual assault, and shock beheadings. By the end of the book, the reader understands that no character is safe and no quest is guaranteed, no matter how worthy or beloved. I also had a little look on Grimdark magazine. This is a page that I often read the articles from, and I think they're fantastic, so I wanted to add this too. This is something that I wanted to include because I think this also encapsulates why I think part of the reason why I consume dark media and dark fantasy. Humans can't be boxed neatly into categories of good and bad. We're a bit more complex than that. Refusing to address this immutable fact and just escaping to magical lands where heroes are always good and never besmirch themselves with questionable morality is like putting blinkers on and shoving fingers in your ears. In a more realistic world, a hero could easily find himself doing evil things. Glockter, Abercrombie's First Law series, can retain a significant position in a flawed society and avoid responsibility for his actions because he is granted the authority to perform sadistic acts. It's interesting to get into the mind of a character like this because it helps us understand the world we live in and how such vile people can exist. This is something that I really resonated with when I was doing my research into grimdark fantasy and dark fantasy as a whole. I think so many sort of traditional stories that you have a line, good characters on one side, bad characters on the other. That it's very clear. It's very clear. I think in a lot of dark fantasy, the blur between that is what is explored. And I think that is sometimes what I like the most because it feels more true. It feels more honest and it feels like a more accurate representation of humanity. There are so many times that I will hear people talking about characters in books and they'll say, oh, you know, they always did the right thing. They were too good, as a critique. And I think we are, as consumers of fantasy and just media in general, I feel like there's definitely a trend in us seeking out and maybe not supporting, but trying to understand the times where good people make bad decisions and do wrong things. So I wanted to ask other people. So I asked on Instagram, why do we read it? Why do you read dark fantasy and what do you like about it? This is what some people on Instagram said. A lot of times these genres explore truths and realities that other genres are afraid to touch, so maybe they feel more authentic. I wholeheartedly agree with this one. I think this is something that's really important for me. is that I think fantasy, and it's something that I spoke about with David and Johanna, they asked me about my Berserk journey, and I explained that reading this has given me an opportunity, no matter how dark it is, it's given me an opportunity to see some of the extreme scenarios of human nature and choice and wrongdoings, but through kind of, I wouldn't say maybe like a safety blanket, but it feels like, because it's the genre that it is in manga and because it is fantastical, it allows that comfort blanket of it's not real, but it explores real themes. You're exploring extremely real themes, real topics, things that happen, but in a fantastical setting. You've still got that barrier of, but this one isn't real, this bit isn't real. And even though it's inspired maybe by true events or by true feelings or true experiences, the actual lens that you're seeing it through is a mask. And it makes me feel safer to explore that. And that's how I feel. Another person said, because it shows all sides of what it's like to be human, there is no good and bad, we're all a bit of both. I think I touched on this earlier. Again, I think people are not tired of a clear right and wrong as such. I think we all love a good hero, but more and more, I think we're also all loving a good villain. And I think it's that where we're starting to learn, actually, it's not always heroes and villains, but actually it's just people that either consistently make good choices and only a few bad ones, or people that consistently make bad choices and only a few good ones. And actually that as humans, we are capable of doing both of these things in certain circumstances. Somebody else commented to say, I think because it seems more real, the characters and personalities and moral decisions that they make. Yes, ultimately, as humans, we are all flawed. We all make mistakes. We all do things wrong. And I think some people can maybe get a bit tired of seeing a particular character just always doing something right and always making the right decision. This is, as I say, often a common critique in fantasy as a genre, is when a character is constantly just always getting everything right the first time and never having to suffer, never making a mistake, because it seems completely unrealistic and untrue to what it is to be a human. Someone also commented, I want pain, which I really resonated with, because I've spoken about this so much on my channel about how it really seems odd to me, but sometimes the more painful the book and the more painful the experience of reading it, the more of an impact it has on me. And I'll touch on that again later. So given all of this, given all of everything I've just said, why do we read it? So I had a little look into this too. I did some research to see what other people were saying as to the reasons that they think people are consuming dark media and dark fantasy and why they do it. So Literary Hub said that one reason, or one possible reason, is catharsis. Now, this article that I found is specifically talking about grimdark fantasy, so I just wanted to share that with you. So it says, grimdark is much like horror in that it presents a terrible, even terrifying reality, one a reader can immerse themselves in but escape from easily, simply by closing the book. It can distract us from our own terrible, sometimes terrifying reality, comfort us, and even provide some interesting lessons. I think this is something that I mentioned a moment ago with my experience of reading Berserk. It's allowing me the opportunity personally to explore some incredibly dark things, dark choices, dark experiences, grief, trauma, so many other things, loss, devastation, war, all incredibly dark themes. But because it's happening in a fantastical, made-up world, and I can close it off, I can just stop it at any time, it gives me a chance to escape into a world that is completely different. And so I can still see these dark themes and maybe gain a little bit of understanding as to why it's happening and explore it, but in the safety of the fact that it's not real. This is a fantastical scenario. And then I can close it and it's gone. And I think I really resonate with that. Literary Hub also says, the darker expectations of the genre allow grimdark authors to explore age-old philosophical questions in new, interesting and entertaining ways. For example, do good ends justify cruel means? Or should we feel obligated to do the right thing even when it's suicidal? Can any person be trusted with absolute power? That such political and moral questions can be posted without providing a clear answer is part of what makes storytelling so powerful. This is something that specifically I think is really well explained popularly in A Song of Ice and Fire, the explorant of Daenerys' character of Dany. I know the ending of A Song of Ice and Fire in terms of the series, the television series. I know a lot of people were not happy with the ending. But then I guess in contrast to that, you could say that it's an exploration of this. You know, do good ends in her eyes justify her cruel means that she went to, those extremes that she went to? And again, the question of, can any person be trusted with absolute power? If you are a watcher of Game of Thrones, or if you've read A Song of Ice and Fire, I know the book series is sadly unfinished, but that exploration of Daenerys' character, you know, somebody that so many people have faith in and believe can be a really good ruler, and maybe questioning and seeing along the way the pressure of that and what it does to her, is a really interesting exploration. Because you have to think, when you're watching these things, I always think the same thing. What would I do? What would I have done in that scenario? Would I cope? Would I have made that choice? I'm constantly putting myself, when I'm reading or watching these things, into that character's shoes and questioning, what would I do? And a lot of the time you come to probably to the same conclusion as me, which is, I actually don't know what I would have done, or I would have probably made a mistake there as well, because that's what I think for myself. And it just goes to show all of us are capable of making bad decisions at some points under pressure, whether that's just because of the circumstances, the people around you. And I think that seems so true to being a human. To add to this, Literary Hub also finished this article by saying, when done well with care and intelligence, dark and violent tales can offer valuable insights into the human experience. Not only do they portray the lowest lows to which humanity can descend, they often illustrate the value in the struggle to ascend. This is, again, and I'm sorry to draw upon A Song of Ice and Fire again, but I think another interesting thing that links to this is often something that I find myself doing is liking and appreciating a character arc. I think a very famous character arc from A Song of Ice and Fire from Game of Thrones is that of Jaime Lannister and also Theon Greyjoy. They are two characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, in particular in Game of Thrones, who really descend to the deepest, darkest depths of what a human can do to another human or multiple people. And yet there are points in the series, for me personally, where I found myself feeling sympathy for them. And I know it sounds awful because they did awful things. But again, it's building into that characterization. And also it allows you the chance to look into their lives and think about where they've come from, their past, how they've been treated, how they've been spoken to, what was expected of them. You start to understand some of their choices, as vile as they are. Us as humans, we never really find ourselves in those every day we don't tend to find ourselves making these kinds of choices. But it is really interesting to see and explore what humans will do and why they will do them. And I think this is another thing that's quite popular at the moment. This is not fantasy related, but why I think so many people enjoy watching documentaries, for example. There's a huge influx of documentaries on Netflix and things like that about serial killers, murder cases and things like that. And I think a lot of people do watch them because they just want to know how and why someone has made that choice and explore that. I think we just find it interesting. I think we can't help ourselves sometimes. Another article suggested a few additional points. So medium.com said, it makes no promises of happy endings. It embraces the chaos, the uncertainty, the truth that not every story ends well. It doesn't shy away from life's cracks. It thrives in them. I wholeheartedly agree with this. I think this is where some books, it's interesting when it's more specifically for me and more recently for me, and without giving any spoilers, the ending to Jay Kristoff's Empire of the Dawn book 3 in Empire of the Vampire. The ending and the choice that Jay made, a lot of people are either absolutely loving and think it was perfect, or they've gone the other way and thought, ooh, I'm not sure about that, or then on the fence, or they've taken a bit of time to think about it. I'm in the bit of time to think about it camp, but now I think it's perfect. It's very, very fitting. And a lot of it is to do with how dark the ending is. And it's so interesting because I think so many of us were asking the same questions. I think, but yet the story as a whole, regardless of the ending, does focus on the fact that along the journey, so many bad things have had to happen, and it does expose life's cracks. It's interesting to know that that's something that I'm seeking as a reader sometimes. And it made me question myself when I considered my response to how dark the ending of it was. Medium.com also suggests that dark fantasy pushes against this. It forces us to confront the reality that life doesn't wrap up neatly. It mirrors the unpredictability of real life. It's not just a genre, it's a reflection of our struggle with life's unknowns. I think this too. I would agree with this. I do think it is a bit of a mirror. But again, as I mentioned previously, it's a bit like a safety net as well. Dark fantasy specifically allows us to see all these things and kind of see similarities in our real lives, maybe with people that we know or experiences that we've had. But because it's in that fantastical setting, it's generally it's fiction, it's made up, and even though there's a lot of inspiration that may have been used or real events that may have inspired it, the actual story itself is often completely fictional, and therefore it offers that safety blanket of knowing that what you are reading isn't true. It's just influenced by truth. But I think we also like that too. We like the fact that there is truth in it. Now, I don't think I can have this discussion, even though this isn't really a critique. This is not a critique of dark fantasy, grimdark fantasy at all. I am an avid reader of it. I adore these genres. I love reading dark fantasy, but there are often critiques of it, and I wanted to draw upon those as well. Literary Hub says, while some defend grimdark as a genre and say that the lack of morality is more of a true reflection of human nature, a lot of people see grimdark's depictions of sexism, racism, brutality, and many other aspects as unnecessary and gratuitous. Now, this is something that I explored and spoke about with David and Johanna. There are definitely books that I've had to take a moment. I've read them and thought, oh my gosh, that was really dark. Was that necessary? And there are a few books where this has taken place. I spoke specifically about A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara with David and Johanna, and how at points there were moments where I thought, I wonder if actually at this point the author has gone too far. Is it just being dark for dark's sake? Also, there was one moment in Berserk where I had to close it and think, oh, did it need to do that? Did the author need to make that choice? And so it does ask a lot of questions, but I think they're definitely probably I think this whole point of whether it could be seen as extreme and unnecessary and gratuitous, I think this is very difficult to explore without using the example of the fact that we are all different people and we all have our own different experiences going into these things. So something that is really dark for one reader or watcher of dark fiction, dark fantasy, is going to have a completely different experience to somebody else. That experience is going to mean that one person will read one thing and think it's too far. Another person will read it and think it's fine, or actually I'm okay with this because I feel like it's justified in this scenario. And I think that's really interesting. Grimdark magazine also says, Jessie in 2013 accuses grimdark writers as saturating their works with sex and violence in order to achieve cheap sensationalism, in order to entice readers and buy books. Now, I think, we all know the phrase sex sells and things like that. I think this is something that can be explored across all media and not just grimdark fantasy. I think this is something that can be explored everywhere. I think there could be an element of the argument which links this to shock value and shock factor. As somebody who reads a lot of dark fantasy now and is constantly adding more dark fantasy and fiction to my TBR, and does watch movies and series that are dark and really, really gets something out of the experience, I also do have a line, and I do draw the line at certain examples. There are certain movies that I will refuse to watch because I think, I just know that's not for me. It seems too out there. And there are definitely books, I think, that would be the same for me as well. So I think a lot of the time, it really just depends on who you are as a reader or a watcher and your experiences. But I do agree with this, that there are points for some people where it is just a bit too far, or that it has been included as a theme purely to gain attention or to hook the reader or to try and maintain their attention. And sometimes it's not necessarily justified. I spoke about this a lot with David and Johanna. Something that I often find when I'm reading this kind of genre, dark fantasy, is when there are those dark moments, I do have to, justified seems like an odd word to use, but it's the best one that I can use in the moment that I'm recording this. I do often have to reckon with this question in my head of, this dark thing has happened. Was it justified? is it worth its time on the page? Is it worth being used as a device or an event in this story? And again, I think this is going to completely depend on the reader and their experience and how the rest of the book or the movie or whatever it is plays out and how it is dealt with. I think a lot of people are okay to read or watch a dark event happening as long as it is dealt with and reckoned with well later on. And I think that's something that's really interesting to explore as well. In summary, I just wanted to go over a few of the other reasons why people often read dark fantasy or grimdark fantasy. So we've spoken about this one, but catharsis and escapism. It allows readers to immerse themselves in a terrible world from which they can easily escape by closing the book. It can provide a sense of catharsis and serve as a distraction from our real world problems. Secondly, a glimmer of hope. Many grimdark stories feature a soul-crushing and tormenting darkness, but offer a small glimmer of light that keeps the reader engaged and hopeful. This is another thing that David asked Johanna and I. Can we live in a book that is just dark, or do we need that glimmer of hope and that glimmer of light? And I think I'm definitely in this camp of I do need something. It doesn't have to be a happy ending as such, but there needs to be something in there, whether it's a character or things that are happening. There has to be some kind of glimmer. Comfort in nihilism. Some readers find comfort in the genre's nihilistic and immoral themes, which can feel like a simpler worldview where characters aren't bound by traditional morality. This can be absolution from having to worry about morality. This is something I think about a lot when I have been reading the first Law series, Glocta. Glocta is not bound by morality at all. His job is to be an inquisitor and to find out answers from people, find information, and do it by any means necessary. And when you look at Glocta's past and what's happened to him, being someone that has been tortured and is now a torturer, it's really interesting to explore that, where you kind of think it is quite a simple, you would think it's a really difficult scenario. You would think, well, no, you would never do that because you've been through that, so you wouldn't want to do it to somebody else. But now he has been given this opportunity to live and sustain a life without having any moral sort of binding at all. He doesn't have to do the right thing. He just has to do his job. He can justify what he does because he's doing his job. He's doing his job. He's doing what he's being asked to do. So there's no necessary right or wrong. But throughout the series, Glocta always asks himself the question, why do I do this? So even he reckons with it as a character. And I think that is such clever characterization and incredible writing by Joe Abercrombie. I would say another aspect of this would be Varys's character in Game of Thrones. He often says that he serves the realm. And I think even though you could argue that in that case, he is moral bound, but also he will make choices and chop and change who he serves to make sure that he is serving the greater realm as a whole. But that does mean that he ends up betraying characters and his choices lead to other deaths. And so you have to question, was it the right decision? And I guess the answer is, we'll never know. Another thing that I read a lot about is the psychological resonance. So it says that the genre can challenge readers to confront their own darker impulses and the darker side of humanity, which leads to a deeper, more psychological experience. Though often more extreme than real life, dark fantasy does allow us as people to sort of see someone maybe placed in a similar scenario or maybe making a choice that you can relate to. And you might think, oh gosh, okay, that's why they did it. And you can gain understanding of your own decisions and yourself as a person through this as well. Finally, something that I thought really resonated was this. It can be a way to make sense of chaos. In challenging times, grimdark stories can bring people together by reflecting the harsh realities they face, helping them cope with difficult historical moments. I would agree with this. I think it's, often fantasy is inspired by true events, whether they are wars, attacks, things like these. Seeing things that are inspired by true events, but again, through that different lens of it being a fantastical setting, can allow you to talk about it and explore these things, but through that lens, to be able to make sense of it, to be able to understand, to be able to ask questions and answer questions with that knowledge that this specific experience is not real. That was a bit of a ramble, and I must apologize because it's probably not very sort of coherent as such, but I just wanted to explore it a little more because I've noticed as a reader that, as I say, my physical TBR is growing and growing, but it's filled with books that are typically dark. I was speaking to Abby, Books and Three Cats, the best person in the world, about this earlier, and she was talking about reading dark fantasy often, as to her as a reader, gives her the experience. It often leads to a more emotionally impactful experience to her. A series that we spoke about a lot was The Live Ship Traders by Robin Hobb, because we both had very sort of emotional reactions to things that happen in that series. Now, that series is not labelled as a dark series at all, but it explores some really dark themes and some questionable characters. Not even anti-heroes, just very much like dark characters, real villains with no good intention at all. Some of the experiences of those characters really hit us emotionally. It feels true. I think that's the biggest thing for me, is though you could argue that some of these books, you know, the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff, Malazan, you could argue all of these things are, well, they're fantastical, you know, they're not real, but they do explore real themes, and they still allow for that emotional connection. Finally, just to finish up, for me personally, in my experience, I have found that I have resonated the most with dark books, which sounds really bad because it makes you just have to think, Ashley, why are you so horrible? Why do you only like dark books? And it's not that I only enjoy them, and it's not that I only find enjoyment from dark books, but I definitely do find as a genre that it is one that I am seeking out more and more. And I think it's because, like Abby said, it has the most emotional impact on me. These are the books that really get under my skin, sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way, but they are also the books that make me ask questions myself about the world and of myself as a person, and they linger in my head. They're books that I think about forever. Whether it's a series like The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne, where you've got some really bad things happening and really dark characters, but arguably it's not as dark as maybe some other series, like The First Law, where pretty much every single character is bad. They make me ask a lot of questions, but they never leave my mind. They are two series that I think about daily. I think about them every single day. I can't shake them from my mind, and they've stuck with me. Live Ships by Robin Hobb stuck with me. I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop thinking about certain characters and what they did. And I think had the books not been, or had dark elements in them, those dark elements and those explorations of those themes, they may not have had that impact on me. They may not have stuck with me. I've always said, if a book makes me ask questions and really makes me think, then I often applaud that book, because I think that's really important. And often dark books do pose those questions. So I personally think that's why I'm seeking them out. They linger in my mind, and they just feel more emotionally impactful. But that's not always the case. There are also lighter, happier books that do the same. But for me at the moment, it's dark books. Please do let me know in the comments below what your reason is. If you are a reader of dark fantasy, what are your reasons? Why do you like it? Why do you think as humans we consume this media? Why do you think we enjoy it? Why do you think we get fulfillment from it? I'm curious to know. And also, I want to say that this is by no means we can only get fulfillment from this genre. Not at all. It's quite strange that I will be, for example, my mum will be like, what book are you reading? And I'll tell her about it. And she's probably thinking, oh my gosh, did I raise her right? Is she okay? Because I just read books that seem really dark and are devastating, like absolutely emotionally devastating. And yet I want more of it. And I think, am I okay? Probably not, but maybe it's okay because I've got this guy to go and cuddle when I have an emotionally devastating moment. So that's why I wanted to talk about it. It makes me laugh that silly little me is sat reading these dark books, having the best time ever. Am I okay? Is that bad? I'm not sure. Why do I do it? Why do I do this? Like Glockter, why do I do this? It's so interesting. Please let me know all of your thoughts below. This is just skimming the surface. I don't know anything deeper than what I've just explored, but I just thought it would open up a really good discussion and an interesting one. If you have stayed to the end, thank you so much for watching. If you got to the end of this video, could you please comment, we need something, a little bat or something, just to show me that you got to the end of my rambles. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please do give it a like. I would be so, so grateful. And if you would like to join and become a firm member of the Library of a Silversaint, then please do hit that subscribe button. I would love you to join the family and be a part of this wonderful community. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a lovely day, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.